It's the 1970s. America is in the grip of an economic storm. Inflation is rising at a pace not seen in decades. Gasoline prices climb week after week. Groceries seem to jump in cost every time families visit the store. And the sense of financial anxiety is everywhere. The decade is remembered for many things: disco, Watergate, and the Vietnam War, but for millions of working and middle-class Americans, it was also remembered as a battle for survival against runaway prices. But history tells us that in moments of crisis, resilience often shines through in the most unexpected places. In this case, it was in the kitchen. With household budgets stretched thin, families turned to creativity rather than despair. They invented new dishes, revived old ones, and found ways to make affordable meals taste indulgent. The 1970s became a time when necessity gave rise not only to invention, but also to a culture of resourcefulness that kept families fed, communities bonded, and traditions alive. These meals were more than food. They were symbols of resilience in an age of uncertainty. Imagine a dinner table where a humble cheese ball could turn an ordinary evening into a celebration, or where a casserole made with the simplest pantry staples could fill not just stomachs but hearts with warmth. Today, we revisit these classic recipes, not just to relive nostalgia, but to uncover lessons still relevant in our world of economic challenges, inflationary cycles, and debates about food security. Take, for example, the cheese ball. This wasn't just a snack in the 1970s. It was practically a cultural icon of American gatherings, rolled with cream cheese, sharp cheddar, and sometimes crushed nuts. It was inexpensive yet elegant, and it carried a subtle political economy of its own. In an era when imported luxury goods were rare and wages were stagnant, the cheese ball was a way to showcase abundance without extravagance. It sat in the middle of tables, surrounded by crackers and fresh vegetables, sparking conversations that often went on longer than the party itself. The cheese ball became more than food. It was a reminder that joy could be affordable. Even now, you can recreate it for under $5. Proof that some comforts withstand both time and inflation. Then came stuffed artichoke hearts, a dish that seemed extravagant but was deceptively affordable. In the 70s, artichokes were viewed as somewhat exotic, yet they became staples of retro dinner parties. Stuffed with breadcrumbs, garlic, and herbs, they transformed into miniature gourmet meals. Guests felt as though they were dining in style, even if the ingredients came from a can. It's worth remembering that this dish gained popularity during a time when globalization was just beginning to reshape American grocery stores. Imported goods were becoming more common, and families wanted to bring a taste of sophistication to their tables without overspending. Stuffed artichoke hearts captured that delicate balance class without cost. And then there was the green goddess dip. Bright, herby, creamy, and tangy. It was the sort of appetizer that made suburban homes feel like Hollywood lounges, with parsley, tarragon, mayonnaise, and sour cream. It was a dip that required no luxury ingredients, yet it carried an aura of glamour. In truth, dishes like this reflected broader cultural shifts. America in the 70s was fascinated by health movements, the rise of California cuisine, and a growing desire to eat fresh. The green goddess dip sat at the intersection of indulgence and wellness, giving hosts the feeling that they were offering something both fashionable and flavorful. But the resilience of the era is perhaps best embodied in the slow cooker 5-mushroom barley soup. Families across America relied on slow cookers not only for convenience, but also for survival. Inflation meant that meat was often too expensive, so soups became essential. Barley provided bulk, mushrooms added depth, and vegetable broth tied everything together. The soup wasn't just comfort food. It was a strategy. With a slow cooker simmering away, families could stretch a handful of inexpensive ingredients into multiple meals. For busy households, especially those with both parents working as dual incomes, became more common. This was a culinary lifesaver. And then, perhaps the most daring of the decade's flavors, pineapple chicken, sweet meeting savory, fruit blending with meat. This was adventurous cooking for its time. The dish reflected an expanding palate in America as the nation looked outward toward international cuisines. Pineapple, once considered exotic and a symbol of tropical indulgence, became a household item thanks to canned imports. Families discovered that with just a few dollars, they could create something that felt like a vacation on a plate. In many ways, pineapple chicken was both a practical meal and a cultural statement. America was willing to experiment with flavors in search of optimism amid hardship. A ben pasta primavera dish that celebrated vibrant vegetables was more than just colorful food. It signaled a shift toward healthier eating and a growing fascination with freshness, aligning with the environmental movements of the time. At a moment when the US was also debating food policy, agriculture, subsidies, and the future of farming. Dishes like primavera highlighted how cultural and economic shifts were reflected right on the dinner plate. Through these dishes, whether a carrot cake that convinced families dessert could be healthy, or a crazy cake born from the Great Depression's legacy of frugality, the 1970s told a story of survival through food. Each meal was part of a larger narrative. How families endured an age of financial strain. How global trade began shaping American kitchens. And how creativity transformed hardship into memory. When we examine them now, these recipes are more than just nostalgia. They are living reminders of how ordinary people found extraordinary ways to adapt in the face of inflation and scarcity. And in today's climate where, once again, we face rising prices, strained supply chains, and uncertainty, these lessons feel urgent. Stop for a moment and imagine yourself at the dinner table in 1975. The TV in the background hums with news about oil shortages, rising prices, and political scandals. Yet here, in the kitchen, something else is happening. A pot of 5 mushroom barley soup bubbles gently, sending its earthy aroma through the house. Children are setting the table while parents debate whether they'll have enough gas to get to work the next week. But for now, dinner offers comfort and stability. That moment, though small, was a victory against the chaos of the times. It's easy to underestimate what these recipes meant. They weren't just trendy 70s dishes to post on retro blogs decades later. They were tools of survival. They were morale boosters. They were the glue that held households together when the outside world felt like it was spinning out of control. Every casserole, every slow-cooked soup, every humble cake made without eggs or butter, these were acts of quiet resilience. Take crazy cake, also called depression cake. Its roots go back to the 1930s, when families first learned to cook without expensive staples, like eggs and milk. By the 1970s, it resurfaced with new purpose. As grocery prices soared, families dusted off this old recipe to stretch their budgets. And yet, here's the beautiful part. No one felt deprived. Crazy cake tasted indulgent, moist, rich, satisfying. It taught a generation that limitations can fuel creativity, that scarcity doesn't mean joy has to vanish. Now, let's zoom out for a moment. The 1970s food story is not just about individual kitchens. It's part of a bigger economic and cultural shift. This was the decade when global trade began reshaping what Americans ate. Imports from Europe and Asia expanded supermarket shelves. Soy sauce, canned pineapple, and pasta varieties became accessible to ordinary families, giving birth to new hybrid dishes like pineapple chicken or stir-fry experiments. Food became a subtle form of globalization, long before the internet connected the world. At the same time, environmental awareness was growing. The first Earth Day was held in 1970. Conversations about organic farming, vegetarian diets, and food justice began to ripple through communities. Dishes like pasta primavera, with its emphasis on fresh vegetables, were not just tasty. They symbolized a cultural pivot. They said, "We are paying attention to what we eat and how it connects to the planet." And of course, the slow cooker itself, the workhorse of 1970s kitchens, was a product of these same cultural and economic forces. It represented efficiency, economy, and the new reality of dual-income households. More women were entering the workforce, and with that came a shift in how families prepared meals. The slow cooker allowed food to be both affordable and convenient, simmering quietly while parents worked long hours. It was as much a social innovation as a culinary one. Even desserts carried symbolic weight. Carrot cake, for example, rose in popularity because it fit into the new, health-conscious narrative. It was dessert, yes, but it had vegetables, which made people feel like they were balancing indulgence with responsibility. That little psychological trick made it wildly popular. It wasn't just cake, it was reassurance that pleasure and health could coexist, even in hard times. But if one dish could symbolize the resilience of the 1970s more than any other, it might be the casserole. Think about it, a humble pan layered with noodles, rice, or potatoes, topped with inexpensive cuts of meat, canned vegetables, and a creamy sauce. Economical, filling, endlessly adaptable. Every family had their own version. Tuna noodle casserole, chicken and rice bake, even spam casseroles. These dishes did more than fill stomachs. They created traditions, unique to each household, passed down through generations. And perhaps most importantly, casseroles turned scarcity into abundance. A little could be stretched into a lot, and nobody left the table hungry. Looking back, it's clear that these recipes carried something far greater than flavor. They embodied hope. In a world of gas shortages, unemployment fears, and soaring prices, food became the daily act of saying, "*We will endure. We will share. We will find joy in what we have. And maybe, just maybe, that's the greatest legacy of 1970s cooking. It wasn't about disco-inspired fondue pots or avocado green kitchens. It was about resilience, the quiet, steadfast resilience of ordinary families who refused to let hardship steal their humanity. Today, as we face our own cycles of inflation, supply chain shocks, and global uncertainty, these recipes return with a renewed purpose. They remind us that frugality does not mean deprivation, that creativity can turn limitation into abundance, and that food will always be one of the most powerful tools for resilience. So, the next time you roll a cheese ball, whip up a crazy cake, or let barley soup simmer in a slow cooker, know this: you're not just making dinner. You're keeping alive a tradition of survival, creativity, and hope that helped families through one of the most turbulent decades in modern history.